All right. So here we are on our second day of instruction on Pro Tools First, and I want to go back and repeat a couple things, review a couple things, and fix a couple small mistakes and keep going. So the very first thing I want to do is actually go back and talk about placing where the plug sound Avid Edition file should be living. My initial instruction was just to place it in the documents folder, and it can live there, but you need to then go and find it from within the instrument. So we're going to change where this goes. The official place where it should live on a Mac is in the library in a folder called Application Support inside of a folder called Uvi Sound Banks that's already there. It was created on installation. On a Windows machine, it's a bit shorter. It's in program files, and you should find Uvi Sound Banks. So please move that file from your documents folder to the appropriate folder. On a Mac, you need to go into the hard drive. So either by double clicking on the hard drive on your desktop or by going Go and then to Computer and then opening up your hard drive, opening up the library, opening up application support, and then as you scroll down, you should find Uvi Sound Banks. And I have already moved my Plug Sound Avid Edition to that folder, and that is what we want to try and do, okay? So hopefully that's a small adjustment. Next thing, let's talk about that Uvi instrument for a little bit. And this is going to be super basic, okay? Just how to load it up and how to add sounds. So again, Pro Tools First is the free version. So anytime you get the free version of something, you're never getting quite the whole thing. And in this instance, what UVI is giving us is a version of the Falcon synth instrument that only works on stereo tracks. So we have learned how to load up expand on a mono track. We would go up to track for the UVI. We're just going to change mono to stereo and audio to instrument. Okay, always good to name your track and hit create. I'm actually just going to delete that track because I have one already. One thing to notice about mono and stereo tracks also, and this is really, really good, just visual cue, you can see one VU meter. All right, so these lights are called VU meters. VU stands for voltage units. And on the stereo track, you see two of them. So if you're ever having trouble, like, hey, where is my UVI workstation? It's not going to be available on a mono track. So when I come over to a stereo track, and this is an instance where I have a grayed out piece of MIDI, a clip. Remember that all of these sections are called clips in Pro Tools, and that's really important. This one is grayed out. There is MIDI data on it. There are notes, but there's no instrument, so there's no color to the track. So I'm going to go ahead and insert in row A, insert A, go to instruments, and there I do have the UVI workstation. So I'm going to select that, and up comes a very basic empty instrument. If I come over to the folder over here, you'll see where you could navigate. You know, if it was in your documents folder, you could click on it and see all of the contents. We're going to get to this kind of navigation later because it turns out that this instrument is pretty powerful and it's a sampler and things like that. I need to learn how to use it a bit. I've never used it. But Plug Sound Avid Edition all the presets is, because it's singular, it's only one thing, is all the preset sounds that come with in that file. So if you want keyboards, then you can kind of narrow that down, whether you want acoustic pianos, electrics, clavs, organs, all that stuff. Fretted, for guitars and basses, harps, ethnic. Interesting. I'm always interested what's here. I have not spent a lot of time. So I'm actually just going to kind of show you how to use it so you can explore the different sounds. So I want an electric piano. I would like kind of a classic electric piano. And these are things that you may not recognize, but like the Suitcase, that's a Fender electric piano. It's a classic. And there's not too many to choose from, but there's, a dozen. And I'm just going to choose that very first one, and I'm going to double click on it, and I can see that it's loading up. Here are some instrument parameters. Not going to get into them, but have fun with them and see what happens when you turn knobs. Be careful with pitch, okay? Because that's going to throw your notes out of tune if you play around too much with that. We will get into some of this stuff at another time. Okay, so I've loaded up a sound. Now my clip has turned blue, and let's listen to it. Not too bad, all right? So quickly, we've replaced the Plug Sound Avid Edition file, okay, on a Mac inside of Library Application Support UVI Sound Banks, on Windows Program Files UVI Sound Banks. Went over quickly, just how to load up instruments. Let's talk about these default settings that I mentioned the other day. I want to do this formally, okay? So I want everyone to take a look at the counter and this play button. And if I start playing, if I play this clip, okay, by highlighting it, I establish where it's going to start playing. But because it's not in loop playback, it just stops playing right there. I'm going to go to Options and Loop Playback. And what that's going to allow me to do is have a selection that plays repetitively as when I tell it to go. Okay. If I were just to play that, it's annoying, but making music is so much about kind of listening over and over again, checking things out, and maybe because, for example, this chord phrase, this basic phrase that I'm putting together as my song is 4 measures long, I'd like to listen to that in a loop and see how it goes before I start duplicating it. So loop playback. You can see now there's a loop on your playback button here, and pretty important. So we're going to leave our option of loop playback clicked. Now, I believe what I also said before is that typically the preset or the default for metering is pre-fader metering. And what I mean by metering, again, these are called what? VU meters, okay? So these lights show us how much volume, how much amplitude is coming through a particular track. So when I press play, I would like these lights to follow my adjustments on these faders, which we will come back to and go over as well. But again, these faders raise or lower your volume. In pre-fader metering, if I lower this all the way off, the lights are still there. And that's just not, for me, it doesn't help me visualize what is going on and then ultimately what's being fed to my master fader track. So what I would like everyone to do is make sure to go up to Options and unclick pre-fader metering. So the two kind of default settings that we're now establishing is that loop playback is engaged and pre-fader metering is disengaged. We don't want that. All right, because now when I press play, let's see, let's return. Oh, because they're muted, they're not showing me anything. That's good. My volume comes up as my fader comes up, and that's equally represented in the master fader bus. All right, let's take a look at what's going on our tracks in edit and the mix windows. Okay, so this is a little bit of what are all these buttons doing. The most important thing ever, and I'm actually going to say this in the mix window, and this is something that I teach when we look at actually the console, the mixing board that's in our studio, because the mix window in Pro Tools represents a mixing board, essentially the mix, the volume mixing of various things to put out sound to your headphones or to speakers, whatever it might be. Don't get, never get, I'm going to do this quickly here. Let me see, how many can I make? Let's make 7 of these. Boom. Just random. Okay. Never get intimidated by how many tracks you see horizontally or across, because they are simply duplicates of the same thing. And that's a really, really important lesson to learn. What you want to do is get to know what's going on a track vertically so that you can know how to use it. And then you can kind of look across and go, hey, there's 100 tracks. But because I know what's going on vertically, I have no problems. Okay, I am going to delete these because I'm not using them. So, just looking at the drum track, we have a record enable button. That's really only going to be useful for those of you who might have a MIDI controller, an actual keyboard that can connect to Pro Tools. What this would allow you to do is connect your keyboard through USB, and when you hit a note, you could then hear the drum set. If this one were engaged, you hit a note, you would hear that electric piano that I put in there. So this is a very important button if you're using a MIDI keyboard. And then on an audio track, it's a critical button for recording a microphone and recording audio. So it's absolutely critical to understand what that does. If I have, let's see, did not plan for this, but very quickly, I'm just going to go ahead and test this. I have an audio track. My microphone is plugged into an interface, which I will go over at some time, another time. And I'm going to go ahead and put this track into record ready. Hello, hello, hello. And it does not give me anything. So that's a bummer. It might be because I have various routing in order just to get to the video. So forget that one. But that's what the record enable button is. We have solo. So again, if you're listening to the full mix and you just want to listen to the drums, like, hey, something's funky in the drums, that allows me to solo. Now, super common mistake, and super common that people were already doing this in Soundtrap, is I can hear the drums, I can add the keys, I can add the pad, I can add the bass, and then all of a sudden you've kind of defeated the entire purpose of solo. What solo actually is for is narrowing down what you hear to the one sound that you are soloing. In fact, what it does is it mutes the other tracks. So do not get in the habit or avoid the habit of over soloing. All right? It's not a thing. Well, it is a thing, but it's not a good thing. All right? If you don't want to hear something, mute it. Okay, so we have solo and mute. The 3 buttons across here: record, enable, solo, and mute. And reminder again, if you're not sure about something, hover over it with your cursor, and most things will come out and tell you what they are. Okay. This column here is called Inserts, A through E. It is where you insert your instruments. It is where you insert your effects. Not going to get too much into effects right now, but if I were to put a delay, so I'm just going, again, I'm in Insert B now on my drum track, and I put in a delay, and I put in this mod delay. I will solo it so you can hear it. And let's see, it's a short delay. I'm just going to raise this up, make it obvious. This may not be musical at all, but that's okay. It doesn't really matter. Okay. Not musical at all, but that's an effect. That's what a delay is, and you just insert it underneath your initial sound or instrument. One mistake that some people asked about, so I want to make sure that I address it formally again, is sometimes it might be by using the pencil tool that you've been using in the MIDI editor. So you're putting in some notes, you close the MIDI editor, you haven't changed back to the smart tool, and boom, you click on something and it turns these lines essentially into a piano roll. Again, I mentioned this in class. This is effectively the MIDI editor, but for my workflow, I would recommend against using it at the moment. And all you need to do is come to this spot where it says notes and place this back to clips. Now, there are a whole bunch of things that you could change the view to. This is essentially called track view. And we're going to keep it right now just as our clip view so that we can arrange songs and do stuff like that. We will come back and discuss a lot of these things moving forward. The I/O. I/O stands for inputs and outputs, and that's probably all you need to know to a certain extent. If you do have an interface, if you have a microphone and you are creating, a track, for example, and you click on the I/O, that tells you what inputs you have available to you. Whether it's input 1, I have 4, actually. The outputs, most of you would only have one choice, and that is either, it might say built-in speakers, it might say Realtek 1 and 2, it might say out 1 and 2. It is essentially your speakers, your headphones, whatever you are listening to, whatever Pro Tools is outputting to. And again, just a reminder, we have these lights here that are called VU meters. Just want to see again why I can't see that, but that's okay. No worries. Let's go back and see if I have hit most of these things. Okay, the edit window. For the most part, I'm happy that we've gotten most of this stuff here. Let's talk about the mix window for a minute. So there are, again, 2 main windows in Pro Tools. This is the edit window and the mix window, which is you get to it either going to window and mix, or on a Mac, the command and the equal sign button to flip between these two. Avoid minimizing it like that, because then you forget that you have it and you end up with 20 of them down there. I see it all the time. So learn the quick keys. On a PC, that would be control and the equal sign. Okay, so in the mix window, again, we're just going to talk about one of these things because we don't need to talk about them all because they're all the same. We have our volume fader. Now, I'm not going to get too much into why it's at 0, but they always start there. I will say that 0 is also referred to as unity gain. It is essentially I always make this analogy to a dam, a floodgate in a dam where a river is blocked and you can open up that gate and let water flow at 100%. That's essentially unity gain. You could open it up more and you get 12 more decibels of volume, of amplitude, but 0 is where it starts, okay? So these are volume faders, up and down. You have your same solo, mix, and record enable. So you can do those things either from the mix view window or the edit window. So those are the exact same. And here, this is to me a huge upgrade from Soundtrap. You have your panning knobs, okay? So on a mono track, and this is important and different in Pro Tools than in most DAWs, on a mono track, you have one pan knob, okay? You take your sound and you can pan it to the left, you can pan pan it to the right, or keep it in the center. On stereo tracks, you actually have a left pan knob and a right pan knob. So you can actually kind of get, so you need to, if you want something slightly off center, you need to work with one knob and not the other. But you can also do things where you send it off to the side, but you need to be aware that you want to use both of them. Okay. Moving on up, we have automation, and we're not going to get into that right now, but I will tell you that there are various forms of automation in Pro Tools. You have your I/O again. Sends, we're not going to get into right now, but you can see them in the edit window too. And you have your inserts. So really the only thing that's different in this window, or I should say the only additional thing that's available, two things I think, are your faders, your volume faders, and your pan knob. Okay? But these are also available to you in your edit window. You have volume. So if you click in this little section here of your I/O column, you get a fader, and you can bring it up right from there. You can come over to your pan and pan with this slider, okay? Panning from the center on a mono track, two pan knobs, sliders from right and left in your stereo tracks. All right, duplicating tracks, duplicating clips, changing instruments, adding effects. Okay, I already kind of went over adding effects. So I'm going to use this as an example. Any clip that you highlight, so duplicating tracks, I'm sorry, first and foremost. I always kind of talk about duplicating tracks because when you layer the same part with different instruments, it does give you a richness of sound. So the easiest way to do that is to highlight a clip. Well, interesting, it does that for you. In Pro Tools, that's not how it works, I don't think. If you highlight the clip, it also highlights what's called the nameplate. So where the name is, it's called the nameplate. If you want to change the name, you can double click on it there. This is actually a pad sound. So I'm going to leave it like that, change it. When you highlight that and you come up to track, you'll see a duplicate track command. And all you do is click on that. Now this comes up, and the only thing I'm going to mention about that is, do you want to duplicate the instrument? And if you do that, it's going to be the exact same sound. But it would also save you, the need to insert a different instrument if you're going to change it. And since we only have a couple instruments, I always kind of just, most of the time, leave that clicked, and I go OK. And then I have pad.dupe. I open this up, and I go around and I choose what other type of sound I would like. And for this, I'll just put in some strings and see what all happens. It's going to be horrible. Sounds all right. Okay, duplicating tracks. That was duplicating tracks. And I would want to, of course, name this by double-clicking on the nameplate and calling it strings. Okay? Duplicating clips. Again, using the grabber tool, the smart tool, if you highlight the entire clip and you come up to edit, you will see duplicate, Command D. Now, when I hit Command D, you're going to see that clip butts up right against the previous clip, and that's kind of how you start arranging your song. How many times do you want that part to play? Important kind of navigational element. If you hold down your Shift key, and this is either on a PC or a Mac, you can highlight multiple clips and you can duplicate them all in one go. And that way you're starting to build your song. Then you can kind of sometimes eliminate things. Like, I don't want this drum part to start yet. I don't want the bass to start yet. I just want these instruments to play kind of an intro. bring some stuff up in case I can actually show you and you can hear. Not only is this a loud sound, but if you can hear the actual distortion that happens when the bus, the master fader, sum bus, hopefully you can hear that distortion. It is not, it's not appealing. And again, that means that you need to bring down your volumes, not the master fader, but your overall mix volumes, and make them sound in balance and not overdriving the master fader. When you want to check it again, you click on those red lights, they go away, and then you can readjust and see how things are. Okay? We're going to changing instruments. Okay, this is worth it, I think. Again, you don't have too many instruments to choose from, but if you wanted to say, hey, I don't want to expand here, I'd like to try the UVI workstation, you come over to this little dot here, you click on it, and all you do is you change your workstation. You change your instrument. And you come back over to your folder, you come back over to the plug sound, and let's see what we want to use. And I don't know because I don't know anything about these things. Clav piano. There we go. All right. So we've gone over all of these things, and I will hopefully not have a super long video, but probably